a disfigured bride abandoned at the station, until a scarred cowboy told her she was beautiful. Ships arrived and departed every minute, carrying traders, diplomats, workers, and travelers from 100 different species. The air inside the main concourse was clean and cool, filled with soft announcement chimes and the steady hum of life moving forward. Near Platform 7, a human woman stood very still. Her name was Elara Vance. She wore a white dress that had once been beautiful. Now it was wrinkled and stained from hours of waiting. One sleeve was torn slightly at the seam. The lace around the collar was bent, as if someone had grabbed it and then let go. It was clear to anyone who looked that this was meant to be a wedding dress. People did look. Some stared openly. Others glanced and quickly turned away. A few aliens whispered in their own languages, their eyes pausing on Alara's face. That was what drew attention most. A long scar crossed the left side of her face, starting near her temple and running down toward her jaw. Another thinner scar curved near her mouth. They were old scars, pale and healed, but impossible to hide. Alara did not try to hide them. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, shoulders straight, chin lifted, not proudly, but stubbornly. She had learned long ago that hiding only invited worse questions. Above her, a holographic display blinked. INTERSPCIS Union Transport, departed. The ship was gone. Alara watched the empty docking gate for a long time, even after the lights dimmed and the platform barriers slid shut. Her ticket had been scanned earlier. Her luggage had already been loaded. Everything had been ready. Everything except acceptance. Just 6 hours ago, she had believed she was about to begin a new life. She had met Kareth of Luroth 3 years earlier during a cultural exchange program. He had been curious about humans, about how they laughed, how they bonded, how they built families without genetic councils or appearance rankings. Alara had admired his calm intelligence and gentle voice. When he proposed a union contract, she had cried with happiness. She knew his people valued physical symmetry. She knew scars were considered undesirable. But Kareth had told her it did not matter. He said love mattered more. Alara had believed him. She remembered standing in the private reception chamber earlier that day, hands shaking as she smoothed her dress. Kareth's family had arrived together, tall, elegant, their skin marked with ceremonial patterns. They had smiled politely, too politely. Then the evaluation officer had entered. The officer's voice had been calm, professional, and final. After genetic and aesthetic review, the officer had said, this union is deemed incompatible with Lorothian standards. Alara had felt the room tilt. Kareth had not looked at her. His mother had spoken instead. Humans are already considered physically unstable. A disfigured one would reflect poorly on our lineage. Disfigured. The word had landed harder than the rejection itself. The contract had been voided on the spot. Compensation transferred. Apologies delivered with perfect formality. Kareth had whispered that he was sorry, that it was out of his hands. Then they had left, and Alara had been escorted to the public concourse to make alternate arrangements. Now she stood alone. A service drone hovered nearby, its voice smooth and neutral. Miss Vance, temporary housing can be arranged if you require assistance. Alara nodded faintly. Later, she said. Her voice was steady, though it felt far away to her own ears. The drone waited, then drifted back. Around her, life continued. A family of blue-skinned traders laughed as they passed. A group of engineers argued cheerfully about cargo weight. Someone spilled a drink and apologized loudly. No one stopped. Alara felt something heavy settle inside her chest, not sharp pain, not tears, but a quiet certainty. The galaxy had rules, and she did not fit them. She moved to sit on a bench near the station wall. The cool metal pressed through the thin fabric of her dress. She folded her hands again, staring down at them. They were steady. She noticed that and almost smiled. At least she was not shaking. She had survived worse than this. The scars on her face came from an accident on Mars Station 12 years ago, a pressure failure, fire. Screaming alarms. She had helped pull two other workers out before the emergency doors sealed. The medics had saved her life, but not her skin. At the time, she had told herself it did not matter. Now, she wondered if that had been a lie. A group of non-human travelers passed nearby. One of them spoke in a language Alara understood. Humans bond emotionally, the alien said, its tone curious. I hear rejection causes lasting psychological damage. Another replied, I heard they adapt quickly. They have to. Alara looked away. She did not want to be a topic. She did not want to be a lesson. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt strange. Then the station lights shifted slightly, a signal of an incoming late arrival. The docking alarm sounded once, low and deep. Alara did not look up at first. Heavy footsteps echoed across the concourse, not rushed, not hesitant, confident in a quiet way. Someone stopped a few steps in front of her. Mind if I sit? The voice was human, male, calm. Alara blinked and looked up. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn brown jacket with reinforced seams. His boots were scuffed. A faded cargo company patch was stitched on his sleeve. His face was marked with scars too, one across his eyebrow, another along his cheekbone. His hair was dark and threaded with gray. He looked like someone who had spent a lifetime in places that didn't forgive mistakes. Alara hesitated, then nodded. You can sit. He lowered himself onto the bench beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. He smelled faintly of metal and engine oil. They sat in silence for a moment. The man glanced at her dress, then at the closed docking gate. He did not ask questions right away. Finally, he said, Missed ship. Alara let out a slow breath. Something like that. He nodded once. Yeah, stations are good at that. She almost laughed, almost. He introduced himself without ceremony. Jonah Reed, independent hauler. Alara Vance. Nice to meet you, Alara. No hesitation. No pause when he saw her scars, just her name spoken normally. That alone felt strange. Jonah leaned back, resting his elbows on his knees. If you don't mind me saying, he added, this station doesn't deserve a wedding dress. Alara looked at him, surprised. He shrugged lightly. Feels like the wrong backdrop. Something warm stirred in her chest. Not hope, not yet, just acknowledgement. They decided I wasn't suitable, she said quietly. Who they? Jonah asked. She considered. An entire culture, she answered honestly. Jonah hummed under his breath. Cultures get things wrong all the time. Alara studied him. You're very calm about that. I've been on the edge of map space for 20 years, he replied. Out there, survival matters more than looking perfect. He turned to face her then, really face her. His eyes were steady, clear. You know, he said, simple and direct, you're beautiful. Alara froze, not because of the words, but because of how he said them. No softness meant to protect her. No pity, no expectation, just truth as he saw it. She swallowed. You don't have to say that. I know, Jonah said. That's why I did. For a moment, the noise of the station faded. Alara felt something crack inside her, not pain, but a wall she had built very carefully. She looked away quickly, embarrassed by the sting behind her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Jonah stood. I've got a ship docked for a bit. If you need time, take it. Stations can wait. People shouldn't have to. He paused, then added, whatever you decide next, don't let them tell you your worth. Humans don't work like that. Then he walked away, boots echoing softly against the floor. Alara watched him disappear into the moving crowd. For the first time since the rejection, she felt something shift. The galaxy had rules. But maybe humans did not have to follow them. Lights dimmed and brightened in slow cycles, but ships kept arriving. Footsteps echoed across metal floors. Voices mixed with machine sounds, creating a steady background noise that never fully faded. Alara Vance remained on the bench long after Jonah Reed walked away. She told herself she was just resting, that she needed time to think. But the truth was simpler. She was afraid that if she stood up, the moment would break, that his words would fade into something unreal like a kindness imagined by a tired mind. "You're beautiful." No one had said that to her in years, not without hesitation, not without adding something after. Beautiful for a human, beautiful despite the scars. Beautiful in your own way, Jonah had added nothing. She pressed her fingers together and took a slow breath. The station air smelled clean, filtered, almost empty. It felt wrong somehow. Life was not that clean. A service droned past and paused again. "Miss Vance." "Temporary housing is still available." Alara looked up at it. "How long?" "Standard accommodation allows 72 hours. And after that, there are employment assistance programs," the drone replied. "Or return passage may be purchased when funds allow." Alara nodded. "Thank you." The drone floated away. 72 hours. 3 days to decide what her life would look like now. She stood at last, lifting her small carry bag from beside the bench. Her reflection appeared faintly in the glass wall across the concourse. The dress looked even more out of place now, like a memory that refused to leave. She turned away. As she walked toward the lifts, a familiar voice called out behind her. "Ilara!" She stopped. Jonah Reed approached from the direction of the docking bays, his jacket unzipped now, his sleeves pushed up. He looked like someone who had just finished a long check of his ship. "Sorry," he said, slowing his pace. "Didn't mean to startle you." "It's fine," she replied. "I thought you had left." "Not yet." He nodded toward the lifts. "You heading to housing?" "Yes." Jonah hesitated, then spoke carefully, like someone choosing words not for effect but for honesty. "Mind if I walk with you?" She shook her head. "I don't mind." They walked side by side. The silence between them was not heavy, just quiet. "You don't look like someone who belongs in station housing," Jonah said after a moment. Ilara gave a small smile. "I don't feel like I belong anywhere right now." "That makes two of us," he replied. They reached the lift platform. A soft chime announced the next arrival. As they waited, Jonah glanced at her dress again, not lingering, just noticing. "You planning to keep wearing that?" he asked gently. Ilara looked down. "I hadn't thought about it." "If you want," he said, "my ship's got spare clothes, nothing fancy, but they're clean." She looked at him, surprised. "You're offering." "Just offering," Jonah said. "No strings, no expectations." The lift arrived, doors sliding open with a quiet hiss. Ilara did not step inside right away. "Why?" she asked. Jonah met her gaze. "Because I've seen what happens when people are left behind, and because someone once did the same for me." That was all. Ilara stepped into the lift. Jonah followed. The doors closed, and the station floor dropped away as they descended toward the docking ring. The hauler Disfigured was not a pretty ship. Its hull was scratched, patched, and painted in layers of old colors. The name was stenciled unevenly near the airlock. It looked like a ship that had been repaired many times by hand, not replaced, but it felt solid. Inside, the air was warmer than the station. The lights were softer. The hum of the engines was steady and reassuring, like a heartbeat. Jonah led her to a small cabin. "This one's empty. You can use it as long as you need." Ilara set her bag down slowly. "I don't have much to offer in return." Jonah leaned against the doorframe. "Didn't ask for anything." She studied him. "You really don't care what others think?" He smiled faintly. "Oh, I care. I just don't let it decide my actions." That answer stayed with her. She changed out of the dress and folded it carefully, placing it at the bottom of her bag. When she stepped back into the corridor, wearing simple clothes Jonah had given her, she felt lighter. Still bruised inside, but lighter. Over the next day, Ilara learned the rhythm of the Dusthaven. Jonah ran a tight but quiet ship. He spoke to his onboard AI like an old friend, not a tool. He checked systems personally instead of trusting automated reports. He drank his coffee black and strong and never rushed. They talked while he worked. Not about the wedding. Not at first. He told her about fringe worlds, small human settlements built on planets others had ignored, places where scars meant experience, not failure. places where people learned each other's names because survival depended on it. Alara listened. She told him about her work as a logistics coordinator, how she liked solving problems quietly, how she hated meetings but loved systems that worked. "You're good with people too," Jonah said once. She blinked. "I don't think so. You notice when someone's uncomfortable," he replied. "You adjust without making it obvious. That's rare." No one had ever described her that way. When they finally departed the station, Alara stood in the cockpit, watching Havensport shrink into the stars. She felt a strange pull, not sadness exactly, but release. Jonah did not ask her where she wanted to go. Instead, he said, "I've got to run to the outer belt colonies. No central authority, mostly humans. You can get off wherever feels right." "And if nowhere feels right?" Alara asked. "Then you keep going," Jonah said simply. During the jump, Alara dreamed, not of the wedding, not of Kareth. She dreamed of standing on open ground under a wide sky, her scars visible, her face turned toward the sun without shame. When she woke, she realized she was not afraid. On the third day, they stopped at a trading post built into an asteroid cluster. Word spread quickly. Humans noticed Alara, not with curiosity but with recognition. They saw her scars and nodded, as if that alone told them something important. An alien merchant approached Jonah privately. "You travel with damaged cargo?" the merchant asked, gesturing subtly toward Alara. Jonah's expression did not change. "I travel with people," the merchant frowned. "She will lower your status." Jonah smiled thinly. "I don't measure worth that way." Alara heard later. She did not confront Jonah about it. She did not need to. Instead, she helped negotiate a trade dispute between two human crews arguing over docking rights. She listened. She reframed. She found a solution that let both sides save face. Afterward, one of the crew leaders said, "You should stay. We could use someone like you." Alara hesitated. For the first time since the station, someone wanted her, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because she was useful. That night, she stood at the observation window of the Dusthaven, stars stretching endlessly ahead. Jonah joined her. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "I know," she looked at him. "You changed things for me." Jonah shook his head. "You changed them yourself. I just gave you a ride." Alara smiled. A real one this time. Somewhere far behind them, a station still followed its rules. But out here, on the edge of known space, Alara Vance was beginning to understand something important. Humans did not wait for permission to belong. They were small clusters of stations, mining rigs and rotating habitats connected by slow cargo lanes. No shining towers. No perfect symmetry. Most structures showed signs of repair, plates welded over cracks, faded paint, mismatched parts. But they were alive. The Dusthaven drifted toward Hale's Reach, one of the oldest human settlements in the region. Jonah guided the ship carefully, hands steady on the controls. Alara stood beside him, watching the colony grow larger on the display. She felt a strange tightness in her chest. "This place," Jonah said, "doesn't look like much, but it takes care of its own." Alara nodded. "I can feel that." When they docked, the airlock opened to warm, recycled air that smelled faintly of metal and cooked food. People moved through the corridors without hurry. Some waved at Jonah. A few nodded at Alara, their eyes flicking briefly to her scars, then back to her eyes. No whispers, no stares. That alone felt unreal. They were barely off the ship when a woman approached, short and broad-shouldered, her hair tied back in a rough knot. One of her arms was a mechanical replacement, scratched and clearly well used. "Jonah Reed," the woman said. "Didn't think you'd show this early." "Schedule shifted," Jonah replied. "This is Alara." The woman extended her mechanical hand without hesitation. "Mara Quinn, station coordinator." Alara shook her hand. The grip was firm, respectful. "Welcome to Hale's Reach," Mara said. "Any friend of Jonah's is already halfway trusted." Alara blinked. "Halfway," Mara smiled. "The rest comes with time." Over the next few days, Alara saw what Jonah meant. Humans here argued loudly, laughed easily, and worked hard. They noticed problems and fixed them without waiting for approval. No one asked Alara about her scars. Instead, they asked what she could do. She helped organize cargo schedules. She mediated between two crews competing for limited power access. She listened when people spoke, and that alone seemed to calm situations. Word spread. "She's good," someone said. "She sees things before they break," said another. "She makes it easier," a third added. Alara began to feel something unfamiliar, needed. One evening, as she and Jonah walked through the habitat ring, an alert chimed across the colony. A visiting alien trade delegation had arrived unexpectedly. They were representatives from a central trade authority, well-funded, well-dressed, and clearly uncomfortable with the rough edges of Hale's reach. Alara watched them from a distance. Their eyes moved quickly, judging, recording. One of them noticed her scars and paused. Whispered something to another, both looked away. Alara felt the old ache return. Jonah noticed. "You don't have to deal with them," he said. "I want to," Alara replied quietly. She surprised herself. During the negotiations, tensions rose. The delegation demanded stricter regulations, higher fees, and appearance standards for future partnerships. Mara crossed her arms. "You're asking us to become something we're not." One of the delegates responded coolly, "We're asking you to become acceptable." The word hung in the air. Alara stepped forward before she could stop herself. "May I speak?" she asked. The delegates hesitated, then nodded. Alara spoke calmly. She explained how the colony functioned, how flexibility, trust, and cooperation kept it alive. She did not hide her scars. She did not apologize for them. "You measure value by appearance and efficiency," she said. "We measure it by endurance and reliability." One delegate frowned. "Emotion clouds judgment." Alara met his gaze. "Emotion informs it. Humans survive because we care, about people, about outcomes, about each other." The room was silent. In the end, the delegation agreed to revised terms, less strict, more cooperative, not because they fully understood, but because they saw results. After they left, Mara let out a long breath. "You just saved us months of fighting." Alara felt her hands shake slightly. "I just spoke the truth." Jonah smiled at her, pride clear in his eyes. News traveled faster than ships. Within weeks, other colonies requested Alara's help. Jonah's roots adjusted. The Dusthaven became a familiar sight across the outer belt. Alien observers began to take notice. Reports filtered back to central systems. High resilience despite visible imperfections. One report mentioned Alara by name. She read it quietly one night, sitting alone in the ship's common area. The words "previously rejected human" appeared in the summary. She closed the file. "I don't want to be a warning," she told Jonah later, "or a symbol." "You don't have to be," he said. "Just be you." But the galaxy had already started watching. A message arrived from Havensport Station, the same place that had abandoned her. They requested her presence as a cultural liaison. Alara stared at the message for a long time. "They want me back," she said finally. Jonah's jaw tightened. "You don't owe them anything." "I know." She looked at the stars outside the viewport. "But maybe they need to see what they threw away." Jonah studied her. "I'll take you there if that's what you want," she nodded. "It is." As the Dusthaven turned back toward the core trade routes, Alara felt no fear, only purpose. She was no longer the abandoned bride. She was a human who had learned her worth, and the galaxy was about to learn it too. The journey back toward the central trade routes felt different from any Alara had taken before. Before, she had traveled with hope, then with loss, later with healing. Now she traveled with certainty. The Dusthaven moved smoothly through jump space, its engines steady and calm. Jonah Reed sat at the controls, quiet as usual. Alara stood near the viewport, watching stars stretch and bend into long lines of light. She did not feel nervous. That surprised her. Havensport Station appeared ahead like a polished jewel, bright lights, perfect curves and endless traffic lanes filled with ships from powerful worlds. Everything about it spoke of order and rules. "This place hasn't changed," Jonah said. Alara nodded. "I have." When they docked, station officials greeted them immediately. Not security drones this time, not dismissive clerks, representatives. Alara noticed the careful way they looked at her. They recognized her now. Her name had meaning. "Miss Vance," one official said, offering a polite bow, "thank you for agreeing to meet." "I agreed to listen," Alara replied calmly. "That's not the same thing." The official smiled tightly. "Of course." As they walked through the same concourse where she had once stood alone, Alara felt echoes of that day, but they no longer hurt. The bench was still there. The lights the same, but she was no longer empty. Whispers followed her again, but these were different. "That's her." Then something else, regret perhaps. Alara did not acknowledge him. The council spoke first. They explained concerns about human expansion, emotional decision-making, and social unpredictability. They spoke of risk. Alara listened. When it was her turn, she stood slowly. "You rejected me because of how I looked," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Because I did not meet your standards." No one interrupted. "You believe that humans bond emotionally because we lack discipline," she continued. "That our compassion makes us weak." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "You were wrong." Alara spoke of the frontier colonies, of cooperation without perfection, of scars that told stories instead of ending them. She explained how humans adapted not by erasing damage, but by carrying it together. "Humans don't wait to be accepted," she said. "We build places where acceptance grows naturally." A council member asked, "Are you saying the central systems are unnecessary?" "No," Alara replied. "I'm saying they are incomplete." She turned her gaze toward Kareth briefly. "You see damage," she said. "We see survival." When the session ended, the council had no decision, only questions. That alone was a victory. Outside the chamber, Kareth approached her hesitantly. "Alara," he said. She raised a hand gently. "You don't owe me an explanation." "And I don't need one." He looked down. "I was wrong." "Yes," she said simply. Then she walked away. Jonah waited near the exit. "You okay?" he asked. Alara nodded. "I am." As they returned to the Dusthaven, Alara realized something important. She had come back, not to prove her worth to them, but to prove it to herself. And she had succeeded. The galaxy changed slowly, but it did change. New policies emerged. Human colonies were no longer listed as unstable. Emotional intelligence became a topic of serious study. Scars, physical and otherwise, were no longer immediate marks of failure in trade profiles. Alara Vance became a name known across systems, but she never called herself a leader. She called herself human. The Dusthaven continued its routes, moving between frontier worlds and central stations. Alara traveled with Jonah, helping where she could, listening more than she spoke. On one distant world, a young alien asked her, "Why do humans accept damage?" Alara smiled gently. "Because refusing it doesn't make it disappear." On another station, a human child with burned scars looked at her with wide eyes. "You look like me," the child said. Alara knelt and smiled back. "And that's okay." Years later, Havensport Station requested her presence again, not for judgment but for guidance. When Alara returned, she did not wear a uniform. She wore simple clothes. Her scars were visible. Jonah stood beside her, just as scarred, just as steady. A station official asked, "How do humans decide who is worthy?" Alara thought for a moment. "We don't subtract value for damage," she said. "We add value for endurance." The words spread. They appeared in reports, in lectures, in quiet conversations between species trying to understand humans. As for Alara and Jonah, they never held a grand ceremony. Never needed to. They chose each other every day. That was enough. On a quiet evening, standing together beneath a wide artificial sky, Jonah looked at her and said, "You still beautiful." Alara laughed softly. "You never stopped saying that." He shrugged. Truth doesn't expire. Ilara rested her head against his shoulder, looking out at the stars. She had been abandoned once, but she had found something stronger than acceptance. She had found belonging by human standards.